Good morning. On behalf of Strada, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Connecting Education with Opportunity, Leading from the States. We are humbled and thrilled to see such a tremendous turnout for this event. By our count, more than 30 states are represented at this gathering, which you can see on the map here behind me. Such strong turnout today is testament to your commitment to the cause of improving post-college outcomes for more Americans. It also reflects the fact that expanding opportunity is not a red state priority, not a blue state priority, but an American priority. One of the most enduring ideas of America is that everyone here has an opportunity to succeed. And while that is often true, there is more to be done to ensure that it's true for everyone, especially for those with the most standing in their way. We are heartened to see that states are making real progress when it comes to expanding opportunity. For example, 20 states are now leading in the area of clear outcomes, which focuses on strengthening education to career data systems to ensure that everyone has the information needed to make well-informed choices about post-secondary education. All states surveyed are leading or advanced when it comes to providing learners with the support needed to set education to career goals, develop and plan, and overcome barriers. This is one of the three key elements of quality coaching. Affordability is strong at our public two-year institutions, with 45 states rated leading or advanced. Participation in work-based learning is growing, with a growth of over 11 points in the percentage of graduating students reporting that they had a paid internship compared to the pandemic era. When it comes to employer alignment, states are making gains and filling high-wage, high-demand jobs, particularly in the area of data analytics and information, cybersecurity, software development, and engineering. But clearly, there's more work to be done. While 70% of recent graduates of public institutions realize a positive return on their educational investment within 10 years, 30% do not. And we want that positive ROI number to be 100%. Progress towards that goal is possible if we focus on things like continuing to enrich our education to career data systems through steps like enhancing wage records, improving the quality and ability and availability of career coaching with more real-time labor market information, boosting the affordability of education by reducing time to credential, and investing in aid programs for our most financially vulnerable learners, expanding access to work-based learning experiences that bridge the world of learning and work, and strengthening connections between educators and employers by removing barriers to filling high-wage, high-demand jobs in areas such as finance and nursing. If we get this right, here's what the future could look like. A young person or working adult explores their options with the help of a career coach who provides support at key points along the way. They have clear and timely information about the career paths and earnings outcomes of different programs, whether a certificate, an industry certification, an apprenticeship, a degree, or a combination of credentials. They know the true cost of every program, how to pay for it, and that every public option is affordable and accessible. During their post-secondary education journey, they can engage in paid work-based learning that sharpens their skills and helps clarify their career interest. By completion, they don't just hold a credential or a few, they have a good job, a resume with meaningful experience, and more importantly, momentum towards a better future. In America, states are commonly referred to as laboratories of democracy. We at Strada also believe that states are laboratories of opportunity. And we hope that you leave here today enlightened and inspired to continue to work that will make these laboratories thrive well into the future. Thank you again for your commitment to the cause of getting this right and realizing a future where more Americans have an opportunity to succeed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. The first thing that I want to start out by saying is a really big thank you to everyone who's been part of this, because we did not do this alone, and we had some tremendous advisors from across higher ed, policy, economic development, and so many people have been a part of this, and all of you are now a part of this because you're here, and we really won't be able to actually accomplish all the things that this report is setting out to inspire without everyone in this room. But it's a really beautiful thing to see so many people here gathered and energized around bringing opportunity to more students. So thank you to everyone. All right, so we find ourselves here in this third era of progress and ambition around post-secondary education. So we started off thinking about how do we bring access to post-secondary education to more learners, and then how do we help more learners complete. But now our ambitions are higher. We know that it's not enough just to complete a credential, that we need to make sure that that credential is a gateway to opportunity for every learner. But when we have that challenge, one of the first things that we realize is that this is a complex challenge, and it's not easy to even know where we start and where we stand. And so the first thing that we set out to do is try to create a framework to help us measure and understand where we are. It's not as easy as saying, what's our completion rate? We say, how do we even understand where we are and how we need to get to where we're going? So that's the goal, really, of this index, is to create a set of measures that can help us understand where every state is and then track progress and celebrate the success that we see. So the first thing we start out with looking at is how many learners are seeing a positive return on their investment from higher education. And there's a lot of states that are measuring this now, which is fantastic. A lot of people measuring it in many different ways. This is one way to look at it. The way we focus on in this report is not measuring a total number of dollars, but really a total number of students. So how many students actually would see that positive return on investment within 10 years? Because we know that, again, for most students, higher ed pays off, but there are some that it doesn't. And so that's where we want to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind. As Ernest said, right now what we see is among learners who complete a bachelor's degree or an associate degree, about 7 in 10 would see a positive return on their investment. What that means is they're earning more than a high school graduate, somebody with only a high school diploma, and that the earnings boost they have is enough to pay for the cost of their education. What you can see is this really varies from state to state. And there are a whole bunch of different reasons, and some of those are what we're going to talk about today with the different strategies and keys that we focus on. So for example, when we break this out between bachelor's degree holders and associate degree holders, you see a lot of variation here. You see, for example, that in most states, there's a less consistent return on investment for associate degree holders, which is maybe counterintuitive because we know that associate degrees are very affordable. As Ernest said, in almost every state, 45 states, we rank them either leading or advanced in terms of affordability, which is amazing. They're very accessible for learners. But where associate degrees maybe have room to grow is thinking about, which of these programs, by themselves at least, are a pathway to higher earnings. Now, if you go on to a bachelor's degree, if you transfer, that puts you on a different path, which is fantastic. But we have to understand, beyond affordability, what are the other things that we need to pay attention to? And this is true for bachelor's degrees as well. It's not only how much education costs, but it's how much it opens doors to better jobs for learners. And so that's why we're going to talk about the different strategies that include good information on those education to career pathways, information getting into the hands of students through quality coaching, work-based learning experiences that allow students to get experience before they graduate, so they're really prepared to get that first great job, and alignment with the skills that employers need. So those strategies, we hope, will help us bring these numbers, these percentages that you see in every state, up to 100, which is where we want to see, so that we can fulfill that promise of opportunity for every learner.
Thank you. Both Ernest and Nichole have spoken about the power of a framework. When we have complex challenges, we seek to organize them and so that we can coordinate and work together with shared purpose and intent, but we can all see our shared work as driving towards that objective and that shared pursuit that we have. And that's what this framework represents. It's not something to admire a problem or to shortcut or to celebrate people who are ranked number 1 or number 50, but it really is to help us build this community that you represent and are a part of here today, with a shared commitment to how do we do the best by learners and the communities they live in, the states that they comprise, and the nation that we are. So thank you, my thanks as well very much. Let's talk about clear outcomes as we move into this third era. And Nichole and I have a job here today. Mike Miotti, Nichole like a nickel for every time I quote Mike Miotti, but he's the SHIO in the state of Washington, and he'll be featured later today in one of the breakouts. Early on, he talked to us about a data pyramid. He said the power of a data pyramid is you have something at the top that everybody can resonate and understand, and you've got multiple layers. So whatever level of technical expertise and detail and analytics, you can keep going down that. Nichole and I are going to let you give you a quick tour of the top of the pyramid today. There'll be more breakouts throughout. There are materials and documentation to get to that details. All this has been done with a goal of transparency and detail and documentation and using public information wherever possible. So here we go. Clear outcomes. We're in an era where we're focused on the power of education to deliver benefits beyond the completion of a degree or a credential. And so if you look at this clear outcomes power, a group of state and national experts worked together with the Strada core team to build a list of 10 characteristics of an education to employment data system that would allow us to allow individuals to make private and public and personal investments that are well informed by understanding those pathways between education to career. So those characteristics include the data you collect, how you integrate and combine data, how you make it available, and how you actually use it. So each of those characteristics is categorized for each state. Averaged together, you get an overall rating, and we see in this map. This, again, Ernest highlighted the progress. Now, with 20 states leading more than double where we were in 2024, 10 new states are a part of the 17 states that are advanced. So an area of tremendous progress of states working together. If we look at the next slide, now just think of what this represents. This says where each state is on each of these 10 elements that are part of those overall ratings. But what it really represents is a community of leaders and workers in each state who are working across that community and across states to learn from one another. You're doing what, how? What was your cautionary tale? What was your key to success? How do you combine this? How do you make this work? And so that community has been vibrant and powerful in rapidly building and developing, and they're not done. Many of you here are a part of this, but there are teams and leaders in each state every day working and to advance and harness this power of understanding these pathways between education and opportunity.
So we're starting from a good foundation, as Dave mentioned and Ernest. We've seen tremendous progress when it comes to that state data infrastructure. So more states are collecting and making that data public. The next challenge and the next opportunity that we have is to really ensure that learners are getting that information about where these pathways lead. And that's what the quality coaching focus is all about. So how do we know if learners actually are getting this information? Our approach was we ask them, and so we fielded with our partners who are here today a nationally representative survey that reached more than 56,000 students across the country, and it's representative in 39 states at the 4-year level, 25 states at the 2-year level, which you'll see. And so we asked students, because we know that many times institutions will say, yes, we provide this but that doesn't mean that necessarily students are absorbing it and understanding it. So we asked them, did you receive personalized guidance to help you in choosing an education to career path? Did you get key pieces of information about labor market? So what do your skills align with? What kind of job opportunities, what kind of earnings can you expect with different career pathways? And what are the earnings and job outcomes of people who went to your institution and took your path before you? And we asked them when they received this information as well. And because we know and we have our tremendous advisors here from National Institute for Student Success, it's not enough to give these students information at the end of their journey. They need to understand these choices early on when they're choosing where to enroll and choosing what to study. So did they get it either before they enrolled or within their first year? And then did they receive support to help overcome barriers and to make a plan? So we'll go into each of these individually in a minute because there are big differences across the three elements. But when we look across the average of these, what we see is most states are really in that developing stage, some foundational. So in contrast, we see the really strong data infrastructure, but we see a gap between the data that states are collecting and understand and what students are actually receiving and able to use to make choices. When we look at the two-year institutions, the public institutions in each state, we see a little bit brighter picture. So you see many more states there are at that advanced stage. More students are receiving this kind of information. And I think that's something that we can study more and learn from. Are the two-year institutions, for example, building this kind of information into their courses? Are their faculty more engaged in the community or with the local businesses so that they can understand and have these conversations directly with students versus maybe waiting until senior year or putting this in a career center that many students don't visit? So what can we learn from what we're seeing in the progress in our two-year institutions? Finally, when we break this apart between those three elements, we see the areas of success to build on and then the areas of opportunity. So when you look at that first bar, the support, you can see in both four-year institutions and two-year institutions, the overwhelming majority of students say that yes, they received support. They got support to overcome challenges, to make a plan, but did they actually get personalized guidance and then even less so, that last bar, labor market information early in their first year or before about the kinds of job opportunities and the kinds of earnings they could expect? And you can see it's very rare. So about 20% of students at the four-year level, about 30% of students at the two-year level said they're getting this kind of information. So here's where we see the opportunity to connect the data infrastructure and connect the support that institutions have been really successful in building out for their students, but how can we integrate that timely labor market information to help them make better informed choices?
Thank you. If we do all that well, and we get people making well-informed choices that fit their interests and their pursuits and their aspirations in the places where they want to live and study and work and contribute in their communities, we can't let affordability be a barrier to those best choices. And so we've developed a measure of affordability that compares what it would be like for a student in each state to work their way through college without incurring any debt. And we see great variation in that. If we look at the next, there are three elements to this. What would it cost for the average student? How many hours would they need to work to pay their way through college? What would it cost for a student from a household with $30,000 of income or less to work their way through? And then in the spirit of time is money, what percentage of individuals complete a four-year degree within 4 years in each state? So we take those, categorize, and then roll those up into an average, and we see a great variation in the context that students experience across the 50 states in our nation. What this means is in the state of Florida and Alaska, a student at a four-year institution would work about 800 hours a year to pay their way through school. In Alabama and Pennsylvania, it's 2,000 hours a year. So that variation, that's 30 hours of full-time work in difference. In 4 states, 60% or so, 61% of students graduate and complete a degree within 4 years. In 10 states, it's a third or less that do that. So this variation that we see across state experiences and contexts, this helps us understand so that, again, states can look to, learn from one another and their experiences and go forward. This, again, highlights that variation across states and those opportunities to look for strength, for lessons learned, for opportunities and examples to go forward together. In 2 years, we alluded to this earlier, affordability and accessibility, much more viable for students, much less lower burden to work your way through. As Sandy Baum was quick, one of our advisors, to point out early on in this journey, let's remember that low cost does not always mean high value. And we looked at that with a positive ROI early on, where lower cost and accessibility, affordability, yes. And this then just goes back to highlighting that importance of those pathways and the guidance to individuals to ensure that the path they're investing in will lead to the outcome they aspire to, and our ability to help and strengthen them in those efforts.
Great. So the next ingredient that we look at is, are students having the opportunity to gain experience before they graduate? Because it's not just the degree, but it's also what's on their resume, what kinds of experiences have they had. So we look at 5 different kinds of work-based learning that have been strongly tied to better outcomes for students after they complete. We look at internships, apprenticeships, co-ops, practicums, and undergraduate research. You see that we have paid in front of all of those. So all of these are critical elements. We also know that for a student, we don't want to force anyone to choose between working to support themselves and gaining the kind of experience that they really need to get a good job after they finish. So if we're looking to set a bar for states, we think it's really important that these be paid experiences for students. And when we look across the 50 states at these students and how many have had one of these 5 quality paid work-based learning experiences, we see some interesting variation. So you'll see 2 states there. We've got Pennsylvania and Iowa in blue. What that means is that a majority of their students, more than 50%, have had one of these 5 quality paid work-based learning experiences. You see a lot of states that are striped there. What this is this is our survey, so margin of error. They're right on the threshold between developing and advanced. So what we hope to see is within the next few years, as we continue to collect more data and these states continue to advance, that we could have many more states in that advanced category. Of course, we think that every student should have one of these experiences, and by broadening this beyond paid internships to think about things like nursing clinicals and student teaching, which are included this year if they're paid, there are pathways for every major. But right now, we are around 50% or a little bit less. We'd like to get this to 100% because we think it's a really critical element for every student. When we look at this at the 2-year institutions, we see many fewer students are having the opportunity to participate in these kinds of experiences. We also know, of course, by definition, these are shorter programs, and some of these programs may even be less than 2 years. And so we need to understand, and we're continuing to do research and working with partners to understand what's the context that we should be thinking about for these students and the kinds of work-based learning experiences, or maybe even the kinds of experiences in the jobs that they're already in that can help lead them to further advancement and to achieving their goals. So when we look overall, nationally, we see 43% at that 4-year level are having one of these 5 paid work-based learning experiences. So we have a ways to go. We see 29% are having one of these experiences, but just not being paid for it yet. So that's one avenue that we can look to for change. How can we be more imaginative maybe about things like nursing apprenticeships, teacher apprenticeships, moving those unpaid internships to paid internships so that pay is not a barrier for access for students. And then another 28% of students who are currently not getting any of these before they graduate. And so for that group, we need to think more creatively maybe about how to make these experiences accessible. And for campuses, one thing that we've seen is this often falls along the lines of field of study. So, for example, we see engineers and business majors much more likely to have these experiences, and then majors like history, English, psychology, much less likely. So how can we make sure to work these kinds of opportunities into the degree programs for every student?
Remember where we started, a desire for every individual to be better off financially within 10 years because of the investment they made in pursuing education after high school. As a floor, that doesn't represent in any way, shape, or form all of the benefits of pursuing education and growth and development. But if we look at that as a floor, a minimum aspiration to ensure that positive ROI exists. And we think about building the data systems that help us all connect and understand and have visibility into which paths lead to which opportunities in which places and and then inform students with the quality coaching of their choices. We take the barrier of affordability off the table so that their choices are on the table for them. And then we work to ensure that they're having experiences along the way that connect early on their education and their academic learning and progress and training with the careers they aspire to, so that they're developing social capital and skills that help them immediately enter into the workforce and be productive and contribute and secure those jobs. Employer alignment encapsulates all of that. It looks at how are we doing in that connection between delivering educational pathways to opportunity. We look at it in two dimensions. One is from the graduate perspective in each state. We can learn what percentage of individuals who are working full-time with a bachelor's degree, recent graduates, ages 25 to 34, no professional graduate degrees, so these are bachelor degree graduates in each state, what percentage of them are working in a job that requires the full power of a college degree? So that's one half of it. On the other side, in each state, we can look at what are the early career talent needs? How many people do I want to hire as an employer in this state collectively with 3 years of experience or less, right? And so what is that talent pipeline, that supply-demand look like from an employer perspective of those well-paying, good jobs in those states? You take those two together and you average them and you get then a categorization. Again, here we see a couple of states, 3, Rhode Island, Shannon Gilkey is here, hooray Shannon. Utah wasn't on the map that Ernest put up earlier today, and California I'm sure is represented, but 3 states who are advanced in that regard. We see a lot of states developing and some foundational in that match of employer alignment. If we look underneath that, we can start to understand college level employment essentially varies 10 to 12 percentage points across different states. So what that highlights is that there is between a third and a half of college graduates in each state who are not using the full power of their degree in securing the employment they aspired to, right? This college level employment is one of the strongest predictors of the positive ROI that Nichole spoke to us early on. If we look on the employer side, in this supply-demand ratio, again, you see variation across states. And you're probably all looking at the state you're most familiar with, or 2 or 3, what you have experience with. But you see that variation, and what you start to realize is we've got a problem. We have an oversupply of graduates who want good jobs, and from an employer perspective, we have an undersupply of people who are prepared for those early career jobs that we're seeking. And that's what this is all about. How do we bring that together so that we truly can deliver opportunity to all who invest themselves in education after high school as a pathway to opportunity, strength, improved lives for individuals, stronger communities, stronger states, and a stronger nation. This is the top of the pyramid tour, and we're welcome to go into the happy to go into the sub-basement with you at any point along the way. Nichole and I, like you, do this work because all of us in this room really, truly believe in the power of individuals and in our capacity and their capacity and your capacity to grow. When we work hard, when we work with purpose, when we have mentors and guidance and opportunity and people who see gift and talents in ourselves that we don't always see in ourselves, and encourage and nourish those in structured ways as well as in personal ways, we become something more than we were. We can each think about where we were in the trajectory of our lives and those individuals who made a difference for us. I'm confident each of you can think about people you've helped this week and last week and this month and this year in the trajectory of their opportunities, their continued growth and opportunity. This is what we aspire to, and as Nichole articulated, I don't think many of you are here for the very first time. I watched you come in and shake hands and hug and greet and run across the room to see people that you hadn't seen in years and celebrate not just who you are socially, but who you are in your shared commitment to improving the lives of individuals. We're so very grateful for the privilege we have to support and work with you in those endeavors. Thank you for who you are and for being gathered today. And thank you for all who will continue to help us see one another and understand and learn together through the course of this day, but through the course of this long march to ensure opportunity for each individual. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So wonderful to see all of you today, and what a special privilege it is to have this great panel with us this morning. Before we jump in, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize a few folks. When this effort started a few years ago at a Strada board retreat in Arizona, we had this vision to bring to light this future where everyone has a pathway to opportunity, no matter where they start. And we realized very quickly that the enablers of that future were not being measured today, or at least back then in the country. And then in many ways, we actually had to create new measures to be able to show how well each state was doing in connecting education opportunity. Two people, we had a big team working on this, big team internally, big team externally, but two people in particular deserve a great credit for that, Dr. Dave Clayton, Dr. Nichole Torpey-Saboe. You heard from them. Also want to recognize, though, to bring this to life, right? When you think about what is here today, we have not only that full report, we have a custom report on each of the 50 states. We have a website that you can actually compare results across states. We've got profiles of states that are innovating. All of that made possible by the great work of our communications team led by Travis Reynolds. So let's give all of them a round of applause for that great work. Thank you. We are going to have a little time for questions from the audience toward the end of this panel, if I manage our time well. So want to encourage you to think about those along the way. So we heard today, starting with the inspiring remarks of our board chair, Ernest Newborn, the progress that states are making across the country to strengthen the connection between education and opportunity. It is clear that many states are leading the way on this important topic. This morning, we have 4 exceptional leaders with us to talk about turning this data into action from the perspective of employers, higher education leaders, institution leaders, and higher education systems. We have with us today Laura Ipsen, who's the CEO of Ellucian. She also has the distinction of being the chair of the Business Higher Education Forum, a very important Strada partner and an important organization in America that's connecting employers and the higher education community. We have Dr. Harrison Keller, one of the greatest SHIOs of all time, who's now the president of the University of North Texas, really doing amazing things there. Excited to hear from him this morning. We have Melina Kennedy, CEO of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, or CICP, one of the most powerful and influential state business organizations in the country. And finally, we have Dr. Ortega, Commissioner of Higher Education for the state of Massachusetts. Actually, I think Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Is that right? Sorry about that. There's only 4 Commonwealths. What's the difference between a Commonwealth and a state? Exactly the same, only better. Okay, so with that, this year's State Opportunity Index shows real progress. For example, participation in paid internships is up 11 points. 20 states are now leading in clear outcomes. We're seeing improvement across the country. But the report also shows that we're not yet there all the way, right? We have about while most people are having a pathway to opportunity through post-secondary education, there are about 30% of public college university graduates, including associate degree and bachelor's degrees, who are not getting a positive ROI within a decade. So the first question I really want to pose to the whole panel, we'll start with Laura and then go down the aisle. From your vantage point, what's driving the positive momentum we're seeing, and what's most important to sustain and accelerate it going forward?
Well, first, I want to congratulate you on the report. I was reflecting on you can't really manage what you don't measure. And many decades ago, I worked at a networking company, and I was the person who was driving policy issues for broadband connectivity, which has had huge implications for where we are with education. And the World Economic Forum at the time built this broadband tracker by country. And the future of this will probably be, it's not just saying who's in these different buckets, red, yellow, green, emerging, foundational, best in class, but actually ranking by number the countries. And I saw it just pick up pace in terms of the investment and the value creation. So fast forward, Stephen, I think there's a lot of opportunity. But congratulations. Right now, this is a state index, but as we compete globally around the world, the index has to become global in nature. But what's driving it now? I really see, and I have 3 children myself. One's working, self-employed as an artist and actor. The second one, after research funds were cut, got into Georgetown for a master's, and the youngest is powering along. But I really think that 3 things: that students are in the driver's seat for these types of opportunities, demanding access to employers earlier, showing up in very thoughtful ways to get those opportunities, and the expectation is that when they spend their precious resources, or their families, that there's an ROI. And part of the ROI is looking and asking these days, what are my opportunities for internships, work-based learning? And they're pushing this forward, putting a lot of pressure on higher education, and maybe the leaders I talk to, I think in all the right ways. The second one is we as employers, and I'm an employer too, are knowing that we've got the momentum, because we see in our pipelines of early talent, 80%, that was our BHEF and partner with Strada report, that early pipeline, we know we're more successful when we bring them in as internships. I have never offered in all of my career any unpaid internships, because I want to say it's valuable to me, but more importantly, the student, and they get paid. So we all have to do that. It is about access and equity for everyone as well, that you pay the interns and you make sure that you have them. I had a great intern class. I looked at all their projects. And then the third one, I would say, just on the momentum side, is technology and data. We have more access to technology and data to show the value of these internships, to create new work-based learning opportunities. Sharing data between employers and higher education is very powerful, because it brings back that ROI to students as they either pursue a degree or a certification, to connect that for better outcomes. It's those actions have to lead to outcomes. And then in education, sustaining this is education employers coming together in new ways and improving the value of work-based learning across all the areas that you've documented. So that's what I'm excited about, is that there's a new era that we have, that the workforce in this also age of AI has to get closer to what is really valuable for students and their needs, to get out there. And wrapping with my daughter, couldn't find a job, research cut, but she said, Mom, if I had had more biology, I would have been stacked up higher in some of these jobs. So it's giving students also access to information about what is going to make them successful on the way out, not just internships, but the skills they need, the types of credentials they need to be employable for the future.
So a couple of things. So I think people get overall that the economy is changing fast, and it's racing in directions that require more education and credentials beyond high school diplomas. When I talk to a lot of employers, they'll say things are changing not just faster than we expected, but faster than we understand. And so for students and their families, there's this concern about, kind of a sense that they're going to need higher education. They're going to need some kind of education beyond high school to have access to good jobs. But is the return on investment going to be there? Is it worth the risk? I think I'm really encouraged by the progress we've made in Texas and in other states on availability of data, so that we can look into the data and we get a better sense of what the post-secondary outcomes are. And we have a lot more work to do to make that data available to folks as they're making decisions. And I'd say both students and their families, but also their advisors, their counselors, and the faculty for themselves, high school teachers and our faculty within the institutions. There's this mythology that the faculty don't care about the students, and a lot of times we've just not empowered the faculty with information that they can use to make good decisions about what's going to better equip their students for opportunities beyond their programs. So anyway, there's a lot more work to do there. I think that there's also a sense of urgency around the work integrated learning, because students are expected to be able to show value much more quickly. So in our generation, I think was a little more forgiving about how long you had to figure out how to translate your skills into a new context, where now more and more students are expected to be able to hit the ground running. And so they have to be able to align their skills with those opportunities while they're still in the programs. To call out, though, one of the things that I think is driving some of the more negative things we see, but it's important for us to understand, is you can see in the data about the mismatch between the kinds of credentials that are being awarded and the direction of job opportunities. So we have way too many credentials, for example, that are general studies. So that's the most, in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, the most common credential that's awarded is a degree in general studies, so a college degree in college, right? And that, there's no clear line of sight between that and good job opportunities. So I also am deeply grateful to Strada for the work around the Opportunity Index and shining a light on these issues, but in a way that gives us some clear direction about what we need to do to make progress.
Stephen, I read your forward this morning at the table and thought it was really interesting, talking about parents feeling more urgent than ever that the college education is needed, and is it really worth it? And then you read through thinking that's today's quote, and it's cited from a 1976 article. So everything old is new again kind of concept. But what I think is different, and I'll build upon the comments that were just made, I do really appreciate the State Opportunity Index and what it does for an organization like mine, where we bring our CEOs of our major industry and presidents of our higher education and philanthropy together, is give us some setting of the aim with important indicators that we should be following, not only within our own kind of corner, which we often do, but where we can track how other states are doing. We have more focus on where are other states doing well, or where are we doing well that we want to continue to build upon. And so to have, it's overwhelming, all the indicators we can look at. I deal with that as a CEO of this organization all the time. What should we be looking at? So to have a common, thoughtfully, with the backing and strategy that Strada has put into this, of these 5 kind of overall indicators, and then even within them, for example, if you look at the clear outcomes, the data that's important to drive clear outcomes, that really helps us prioritize and be focused. So I think that's building on the momentum, and I think that's going to continue to help us, again, not work within just our own four walls or our state, but broadly the collaboration that you're helping drive, and the focus and the prioritization is part of the momentum, and I think that's going to continue. So thank you very much for this work.
Thank you, Melina.
So I also want to build on what everyone is saying, and I think one of the things that's interesting to me that stood out in preparing for today is I always like to go back and revisit the different eras that we've gone through as an industry, right, in higher education, from access, success, right, to now finding ourselves in this era of mobility. And we have a lot of more tools now that we enter this era, and I think Harrison pointed out the idea of data being important and more states buying into that. But it also takes a certain kind of nudge to get people to act on this information that I think we shouldn't lose sight of, right? And if you look back at just the 2 decades in this century, you had some pretty monumental developments, right? From a recession to enrollment cliffs to a pandemic, each one of them emerging with a higher necessity to drill down on things that are important and matter, right? And so some of the things that I think of is the narratives around things like in demand, high demand, that were prolific in a number of states. Many of us building policies around those ideas, right? Recognizing the need to really justify investments in higher ed. So efficacy conversations happening at all levels, especially at the state, became really important to illustrate what is the ROI on the money that was being given to the institutions from the state in terms of metrics that mattered, right? And they really just translated into 2. Are they completing? And are they working? And are they earning money? And then ultimately, everybody's concerned about doing back. I think those elements create a tremendous amount of clarity for people to mobilize and create momentum around this. It's why young folks who are entering our post-secondary institutions are choosing certain fields, right? I think in Massachusetts, we're seeing an emergence of people selecting STEM. I don't think that's different in other states as well. Therefore, we're going to see results that we see in an opportunity index where you're seeing a greater ROI because what you study matters, right, as well at the very end, in addition to being able to receive the credential. I think we can't discount these elements. It shouldn't take that level of discontinuity in a state to get us to move in a certain direction. But unfortunately, sometimes it does, because then we get stuck on a debate on whether or not data should matter because of privacy concerns, right? And therefore, we fall behind on a narrative of being able to make a clearer case for why we matter. We're learning that now tremendously, right? And unfortunately, it's creating a disadvantage for higher ed. But I do think that contributes to the momentum, right? So students are recognizing what they need to study. More folks are elevating programs and tying their investments to these things that are yielding. And so this kind of strategic policy to me is absolutely necessary. We shouldn't be skirting or being afraid to talk about certain elements of higher education, right? Often you hear us try to strike a balance between, well, economic mobility isn't the only thing that matters. There are public good outcomes. But there are moments that require us to be very clear about why we're getting certain people into colleges and universities, and recognize that for many of us, the driver was looking for a better way of life, and often that translates into economic mobility, and I'm seeing less as well.
Thank you all for those. Thank you all for those really. Yeah, thank you all for those really thoughtful comments. It's always inspiring to us to hear in folks' own words, like what this work means to them in this sort of new era that we're getting into. And I just want to reinforce for everyone who's been involved in post-secondary education, we have a deep care and concern and passion about higher education. This is not about jobs only, right? We recognize that there are multiple valuable purposes of post-secondary education, but for the vast majority of people, one of the things that they want is a good economic outcome, and making sure that we deliver on that is what this is all about. I'd love to pose a question to Harrison and Noe. Harrison, Noe, the State Opportunity Index shows that the best results tend to happen when education, employers, and policymakers are all pulling in the same direction. There's sort of coordinated alignment, if you will. From where you sit in Texas and Massachusetts, what are the most promising ways to build or scale those partnerships, especially to make sure students get the guidance and real-time information they need to make confident choices about their education and career paths?
So a couple of things. So first, we did a lot of work in Texas that was design research to help understand sort of how we should frame these issues in a way that would resonate with these different constituencies, with employers, with policymakers. And that all fed into, so Texas, at the time, we were the first state to say we're going to condition our attainment goals on the value of credentials in our economy. And what we found is you can build a big, broad coalition around jobs, around economic opportunity. It was important for us to scrub a lot of the jargon out and be able to present an agenda in ways that there were multiple folks could get on board with for multiple reasons. So there's a lot of design work that you need to do. There is making the data available, and so there's tools that we made available at the state level through. We have a tool called My Texas Future, where you can explore different kinds of jobs and the educational paths that are available. That's also where we put our college application and our direct admission programs and that kind of thing to drive traffic to that. But there's a lot more. Also, you have to build capacity with training and support for the counselors, for the advisors, so that they're going to be equipped to be able to advise students appropriately. And so we set up a digital academy for like connecting more than, I think, 19,000 college and career advisors across secondary education to this kind of data. So you need to. So you can't just put the data out there and expect that people they're gonna go to that and they're gonna know how to use it, and they're gonna there has to be sort of a reason that people would be accessing the data and working through it, and you have to train and support folks in being able to use that data. The other thing that just to highlight that we're working on a lot now is we need even deeper partnerships, especially with employers and institutions, as the kinds of skills that you need for good jobs is changing incredibly fast. So we're standing up a new infrastructure we call the Texas Talent Accelerator, that's about trying to distill more actionable intelligence about how those jobs and how those skills are changing, and then also to try to foster better collaboration across institutions so we can get more scale out of the system, we can coordinate, radical notion, we would actually coordinate across institutions, right, to see if we can produce more of what employers are demanding.
You know, one of the things that many of the states did a really good job on is really trying to achieve the benchmarks they established on post-secondary attainment. Right? And we're seeing that play out for a number of states in terms of more students going in. Now, the question becomes, did we do just as good of a job in success, right? I think in Massachusetts, we've got a lot of work to do in that particular area. But the attainment push came to us without really much of an emphasis on the why, right? To circle back on something I mentioned earlier, we've gotten a lot clearer. And when I think about the most recent Lumina goal on post-secondary attainment, it also includes an earnings metric attached to it, right? Coupling those two together has really helped us engage the workforce to see themselves more relevant to an attainment goal as opposed to passively engage in our work there. And I think that clarity to me is what makes a complete difference in what we're doing. We also took the conversations that we're having about return on investments and earnings returns for students as well, and began to really unpack that with members of the workforce. And employers have often raised to us, in addition to feeling like more skills need to be developed by students, they also question their ROI when they engage in partnerships with institutions and the state around things like apprenticeships and internships, right? Things that seem situational, that in some cases may not often engage an individual long enough to get some benefit to the student in terms of a skill set, or for the employer to feel like they have someone there present for a significant amount of time. It's open room for discussions around cooperatives in the state of Massachusetts, which made a bigger difference, right? Because more people feel that if they have someone spending a longer time with them at their company, they now see them as a potential employee, which is a benefit to them, but they exit with a tremendous amount of skills that make them very marketable out in the workforce as well. And we're seeing that ROI play out for the employers and the students as well. And it's pushing the industry to be more intentional about other policy things that often aren't part of the conversations but need to be addressed. And I'll give you an example of what that is. When the push to get employers to buy into this alignment to improve ROI for students moves in the direction of cooperatives, it raises a question from the academic perspective: how then do you align academic credit to these opportunities for students? This way, they're not wasting time and time to degree, and they're able to exit with all those benefits as well. And it really nudges the state to really address that problem as well. And I think that's where we're beginning to see some success in the state around these conversations. I wish there were more of them, because it is an endeavor that's a little bit more difficult to engage in, particularly when you consider the amount of time and investment and resources that an institution should have. But I think as individuals in positions like myself, where we create conditions for these partnerships to be effective, we should find ways to incentivize more of that to happen, because then the entire system begins to benefit, and you'll see better alignment as a result of that.
Yeah, very, very well said. And just big kudos to Noe, both you and Harrison and all your counterparts around the country who I think have really embraced that, access continues to be critical, completion continues to be critical, but this success after completion is something that the vast majority of learners are wanting as well. And it's so great to see all the progress that's happening on that around the country. One of the things that we've seen at Strada, and I know that all of you are very familiar with as well, is the power of work-based learning experiences to help connect education to economic opportunity, to good labor market opportunities. Just one example from our research last year, we found when we looked at controlling for all other factors, when we look at underemployment of college graduates, after the field of study, the single biggest predictor was whether someone had a single internship. If they had one or more internships, their likelihood of being underemployed went down by half, controlling for all the other factors. So it's a very, very powerful experience. I'd love to turn it for a moment to Laura and Melina, two folks whose organizations, both, I guess in Laura's case, both your own organization and BHEF, and then of course CSCP in Indiana, have done some very important work on internships, in some cases apprenticeships as well. Employers obviously play a crucial role in ensuring programs connect to real jobs. In fact, in our work at Strada and all the stuff we presented to you today, what we've identified as the single greatest challenge of all this work is going to be massively increasing the amount of work-based learning opportunities, because that's not something institutions can do on their own. They have to do that in partnership with employers. What would make it easier for states, universities, community colleges, and companies to expand access to paid work-based learning opportunities like paid internships, apprenticeships, and co-ops? We can start with you, Laura.
Right. Well, at the front end of all of this, it just feels like we have to move between education and employers from the handshake to a big hug. And we need to move to a big hug because we've got to get closer to the data. And Noe, you talked about that. Today, the access to data of what's happening to students at a state level is hard to get. The average institution, if you say, do you have all your data? Do you understand your student data across your institution, a system, the entire state? The answer is no. So when I think about access at all levels, it's about powering the data, which means that many of my customers, and we serve 50% of all colleges and universities, that all the data flows through the ERP and the student information system is all about powering that data. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But in terms of moving to a hug, I think we just have to open up the ecosystem of the types of partnerships, take the best practices, make them very visible. It's not just between education and employers, but it's with government, it's with foundations, it's with workforce boards, all the types of organizations that can share the best practices that you bring back into your report, which is awesome. So beyond that, you can start to throw in like, let's do tax credits, let's give different grants. Those are great, but we have to move from those pilot opportunities, single employers who get ahead of it, the larger companies, to small, medium business, which powers the country to have more visibility on what is working for traditional students, but quite frankly, I have more concerns about the disruption of our workforce and reskilling. And how are we going to power up reskilling when you're a veteran and you want a work-based learning opportunity that's not in the military anymore? And I know you were a naval intelligence officer over here, but you want something that's really going to scale. So we've got to look to those different models. We have to measure the outcomes. They need to be visible at a local level. They need to be visible at a state level with government to make the case to put more money into these types of work-based learning programs that will scale, where we can show the data. And today, we're very early on in having accessibility to all the data. Most institutions will say it lives under the desk, it lives on the side. So the goal is when you move data to a cloud environment, you connect all the data, then you can really see real time what's happening with students and internships and the ROI and employability to taking that out further, a more predictive model. And that's where we need to go. So I know I diverted some of the question, but I think this is just the key to saying we've got to take these wonderful things that we do. And Business Higher Education Forum, and I am the chair, but the woman that runs the whole thing, Kristen Fox, where are you? You're out there. These types of organizations are showing regional pilots that then can scale. We've got to be able to scale it. Then you can say, where do you put incentivize employers with tax credits? Where do you build these grant opportunities? How do states invest in something that they know are going to have outcomes at scale?
I come from industry prior to this role, and so one of the things that I think we all know is to make these internships and work-based learning programs work, you have to have industry engagement. And part of the issue is making it easy, frankly, so that it's not hard. If I'm leading a business unit at a global company, and this is a real example, getting approached by different programs to help, it's really hard to pause your day-to-day job and jump in if it's not kind of easy to work through. So two things that I think are really important that we can lean in on, and we are leaning in on. One is the value of intermediaries. They're really, really critical, particularly in newer programming and sorting through how you work through a community, or the challenges that the students may have that need added support beyond what the employer can provide. So our Ascend Workforce and Talent Initiative, led by Brad Rohr, who's here today, is doing some really important work in Indiana to really identify and actually evaluate our intermediaries and bring them together in communities of practice to become more effective and learn from each other, because we know they're so valuable. The second thing I would say is that scale, that building scale. So some of you may know that Indiana is really leaning into the Swiss style apprenticeship model that we're really optimistic about. We have struggled in Indiana to have only about half of our kids go on to college at all, and so we're trying to find new ways to engage them early. And we have to do this program at scale. And so we have all the right partners that have come together. We've actually changed our high school diploma, which was not easy, as you can imagine, led by our Secretary of Education, to have an entire lane dedicated to work-based learning in a employment seal. So, and other things need to happen, but we need to make it at scale so that the employer isn't faced with, well, I've got to go talk to this principal at this school to see if it can work for this high school student. You may be motivated to do that, and many of us who are in industry are, but it's hard. So we're trying to do things that are big, at scale, and then we're also trying to leverage and help improve our intermediaries that we think are essential for success.
And Stephen, can I mention one more thing? I really urge all of us when we build our internship programs to rethink them with 2 letters, AI. Every single employee that I have has foundational training on AI. If you look at jobs out there, they're all embedding AI ready. So 2 years ago, we started a program with James Madison University and their X Labs to say, how do we build product in responsible ways that embed AI? We just didn't do it with computer science graduates. We saw their model of the X Labs, which was multidisciplinary. We then said, hey, we need an ethicist, we need a writer, a marketer, some product experts. We looked at all the disciplines, and we brought those teams together differently. So typically, we'd have product management and coders. We said, let's rethink what our solutions look like with AI, bringing in the best minds of early talent, because this is the way that we're going to work in the future. It's going to be a new ways of teaming. We already see that in most of us working in hybrid ways and digital ways, but having the viewpoints of building things for the future and experiential learning, that is what we're doing today as many companies are shifting, whether you're a Procter & Gamble to an IBM to whomever it is, different ways of working. And most of that, the biggest change that we have is going to be powered by AI in everything that we do, enhancing human creativity, enhancing our skills. But I don't know of one company that isn't thinking about the transformation of their workforce with AI. We have to start with interns. We have to start early. And in fact, higher education does, but we got to take this all the way back to K through 12 too. It's that disruptive. That which is disrupting careers in the future and skills is AI, and we need to use AI to disrupt the future of how we learn and how we succeed in producing students that power the workforce that grow our economy.
Well said, Laura. I want to encourage everyone out there, if you have questions for the panel or any question about the SOI, we will have a few minutes to take those in just a few. But I'm going to first pose, if we have time, I'm going to try to get a question to each of our panelists here unique to their situation. I want to start with Massachusetts, one of the largest collections of brain power in America. Noe, your state ranks among the top states for college-level employment outcomes, nearly at the top. What are a few of the most promising things you're doing to strengthen outcomes for graduates? And are there lessons that you think other states could learn from Massachusetts?
You know, it helps to start off with some fixed parts of the education system that are going to help achieve that goal, right? And one of them is, we're fortunate to have a really good K through 12 system. So already when we think about the inputs going into our colleges and universities, you really have an opportunity to drill down on a post-secondary attainment goal when you have that going for you, right? So I want to just begin by acknowledging that's clearly a very important investment. We can't make any much progress in the post-secondary space if kids aren't exiting with the knowledge, tools, and skills from the K through 12 system. So that certainly helps. When I think about the elements in the opportunity index, I think one of the things that states who make good progress in this area, when I think about the work that Texas has done and other states to move in here, one of that is you focus on the things that you can do well without being overly obsessed by all the things you have to do in order to succeed. I think there's a very important kind of carve out. And one of the things that we were able to build on was a commitment by the state and the state policymakers to invest in things that would help students, particular, and families gain greater access, right? And affordability ended up being that aspect. It's a very interesting conversation to be had in various states, because there are states who refuse to invest in the institution directly, which is problematic, and instead prefer to invest in the students. But nevertheless, rather than engaging in a debate over what's right and what's wrong or having to do them all, we took the advantage of saying, all right, well, then if you want to make an investments in students, what might that look like in order to achieve the goals that we want to achieve? And addressing affordability by removing the barrier and making college free for most students, right? So anybody in Massachusetts who's a Pell eligible student and wants to attend a public institution 2 or 4 year can do it for tuition and fee free with a modest stipend to help them with other expenses. And then at the community college level, it doesn't matter what you make, right? You can go there for free, tuition and fee free as well. And so that helped, coupled with the individuals exiting with the skills, to get more people into our colleges and universities. Now, the question that comes up for us all the time is that, are we a leader in education for all, or are we a leader in education for some, right? And our discovery has been that we're a leader in education for some, and we've got gaps that we've not been able to address. And so finding ways to direct the resource amid the complications of a political climate to do that is the other challenge that we have. And so we're seeing a lot of things emerge where students get engaged into college going a lot earlier, that are not unique to Massachusetts, happening across the state, that are both investments in access, but also investments in success. And if you do it right, you can also tie it to career planning. And these are programs like early college that emerge everywhere that are also helping really move the needle on this, right? I don't think we have the same kind of early college enrollments in some of our colleges that you see in places like Indiana or Texas, but it's certainly growing. And that, to me, is a difference maker that I think more people need to be shedding light on. So those are a few examples of how we've been able to move the needle by building on strengths and adding them on to momentums that are happening in the policy space as well.
I think also just the wisdom of kind of trying to be responsive to the political environment, and you take the wins you can get based on what's there. Harrison, you've been, I think you've been the president of UNT for just a little bit more than a year. You've been working on some really ambitious plans, including the Texas Talent Accelerator, which we've been thrilled to be a small part of. UNT, as you know, sits in a very big, dynamic talent market. One of the largest and fastest growing in the country, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro. How are you using data on outcomes and employer demand to shape academic offerings and ensuring graduates are ready for good jobs and long-term mobility while still keeping education affordable?
Yeah, so there's sort of 3 major components, and for those of you who don't know University of Texas, or University of North Texas is about 44,000 students. We're the largest university in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. About 40% of our students are first-gen students. About half of them are Pell eligible, and so particularly feel like there's an urgency for our region, but also for the students that we serve, and leaning into these issues. And so there's sort of 3 broad areas of work. One of them around data and intelligence. So as Stephen mentioned, the Texas Talent Accelerator it was funded by the legislature and designed in partnership with Strada and other folks, several of whom in this room have their fingerprints on it. But the idea is to bring together employers, chambers, economic development corporations, community and technical colleges, other universities, to do 2 things. One is to look into the data and try to distill more actionable intelligence about the skills that we need. So it's fine to say we need more critical thinking or communication and that kind of thing, but what does that look like? What kinds of problems do students need to be able to solve? And then the second thing, as I mentioned earlier, is to try to coordinate across institutions. So we've got that kind of intelligence. We've also extended the kind of work that we were doing at the state level around credentials of value. And the indicator that we've really focused on, we call time to value at UNT. So we've analyzed all of our undergraduate and graduate degree programs and how fast does it take a typical graduate to break even on their investment, considering opportunity costs, considering typical debt payments. So I'm more skeptical of affordability indicators that are about working your way through college. Because what we see is like there are some, so for some of our degree programs, that time to value can be 3 years. Our on average for UNT, it's 6 years or less. And that's for your total out-of-pocket, your commitment, your expenditures from you and your family. We have a handful of programs between 8 and 10 that are beyond 10 years. So that gives us a sense of where to focus our energy. Do we need more work-based learning? Do we need to spend some of these down? Do we need a micro-credential that's going to boost the value of this credential? So that focuses the energy. The second thing that we do is leverage that kind of data to drive student success. So, taking with inspiration and guidance from Tim Rennick and his team at the NIST and the analytics work that's been done at John Jay and other places. So we're working on career development with Braven and other partners. So that helps us boost the value for our students, especially in the time that they invest in their degree. Altogether, though, I would argue that's all of that's necessary, really exciting. We make huge progress and not sufficient. The other place that we've really got to push ourselves to look in higher education, I think we gloss too much, is what we're actually teaching and how we're teaching it. So we're also investing in our learning ecosystem, right? There's this mythology, again, that the faculty of the problem, and what we have to do is insulate our efforts around student success from the faculty. Well, this is, so that doesn't make any sense, right? So what we really need to do, though, is get the creative energies of the faculty to be informed and channeled in new directions. So we're standing up new infrastructure around the curriculum itself to make sure that it's coherent and then draws on this intelligence to make sure we're embedding those skills and students are practicing the kinds of things that they need to know and be able to do. We have a new kind of infrastructure around making sure we're teaching effectively. We're embedding AI into how we teach. And then a interdisciplinary institute around the science of learning. It's amazing how many of our institutions are working at the frontiers of this work and the science of learning and how people learn. And it has almost zero impact on what teaching and learning looks like at our institutions, right? So we need to push ourselves to make sure that the way that we're doing this work is infused by what we're learning about how people learn, how adults learn, how adolescents learn. I think it's the combination of the intelligence, the university support structures, and also intentional work on the learning ecosystem that helps us make progress at scale.
Thank you, Harrison. I would encourage all of you out there that are interested in the future of public universities to keep your eyes on UNT. We think they're going to be one of the pace setters nationally. I have a couple other questions for the panel, but I'd love to open it up to the audience. If there's a question or a few questions out there, we have one right here. Yeah. Got a mic coming if you just give 1 second. Here we go. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you all for your remarks. This has been a great talk. So I talk all over the country, as probably all of us do on these topics. And I'm really curious because you've got university, you've got corporate, you've got a nice mix on the stage, how you all are thinking about, well, Laura mentioned one thing, which is basic AI literacy skills. But the other one I'd be curious to get you guys' opinions on is how you're thinking about like entrepreneurship, specifically the entrepreneurial mindset. You know, when I was in high school 30 years ago, they used to call them soft skills, you know, but, you know, how do you develop these things and how is the mix between what you're seeing, what the corporations need versus what is being developed on the college campuses? I did a talk on both of those topics probably about 8 months ago, earlier this year. And the only reason I mentioned it because it was at University UNT.
You guys, who wants to take that?
Sure, I'll make a few comments. We believe entrepreneurship is a critical part of a healthy economy, so we kind of start with that proposition. And we have, through the organization that I lead, we have worked very closely with various partners who go into high schools. Started Up Foundation is one that's in Indiana in particular, that work with the school administration and then ultimately the teachers to promote entrepreneurship and real student industries and councils that create businesses and create wealth in some cases, and learn. And then on the other end of the scale, we have university partners that are part of our organization, and we have brought them together collectively to, as a group, think about how to drive more entrepreneurship within their ecosystem, really out of the university lens. And there's a whole host of things we're doing. One that may sound small, but that has been meaningful is actually just collecting stories and sharing the successes of entrepreneurship. We have a culture issue, at least in Indiana, where there's less appetite for risk. So those are some of the things that we're doing. But I agree with your comment 100%. We think it's a really important part of the overall ecosystem.
I could just put a plug in on one thing also, that if we really value entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we also need to reward our faculty for doing that work. And that's both on the coaching and supporting students side, as well as themselves being entrepreneurial and taking their ideas to market. So we need to broaden the criteria that we use to evaluate and reward our faculty, because the traditional measures are way too narrow. And and then people will complain that the faculty aren't as engaged in these issues as we'd like to see when we actually penalize them if they do that. So that's one of the critical points, is make sure we've aligned our incentives around valuing that work around entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Beth.
I'll give a quick example of something that I think is a very interesting development, and I'm not going to state credit for it, because it's really something that's coming from our institutions in and of themselves. And that they're using entrepreneurial mindsets to solve real-world problems that we're currently being encountered by, some of them which feel existential, and AI is a perfect example. I've seen faculty and students sort of partner around, rather than coming up with reasons of identifying things that would be lost because of the diffusion of this new technology, instead of figuring out how can we partner with developers in order to achieve outcomes that would benefit society, right? And so you've seen that now by some of our medical schools, where they're really trying to sort of tap into the development and proliferation of solutions coming up in the medical field, right? And so offering up the opportunity for developers to come into the institutions as fellows for like a month, have access to faculty and students who collectively can solve a problem, and then together they take the product out to market, and it forms some very interesting relationships. And I think the more that we could position institutions to see themselves as problem solvers to these things that encounter on a regular basis, it benefits the entire ecosystem, right? All the way up to the users who are going to ultimately subscribe to these products. But it's developing a very interesting approach to applied education for things that we're encountering on a regular basis. I thought I would throw that out because it converges those two ideas together.
Terrific comments. We got a question over here.
Hi, Deborah Cromie, a president and CEO at Trellis Company in Austin, Texas. I wanted to ask the panel about something we have seen happen over the last 10 to 15 years, which is that industry had encouraged students to go into computer science, computer programming, right? We have a number of students that have graduated over the last couple of years. They can't find jobs. Why? AI is taking those basic entry-level jobs. So I have two questions associated with this. One is, and I think you're going to say, Laura, that internships can solve this problem going forward, or paid apprenticeships can help make sure that people are at the front lines of all that. But we have another situation which is related to the fact that we have over 37 million students, individuals across this country who have some college, no credential. And close to 4 million of them, as Harrison knows, are in the state of Texas. And we just had the largest high school graduating class graduate. So it's going to start going down. So institutions and employers need to look at this from both sides in terms of what we're going to be able to do to fill the jobs of the future by upskilling or bringing those folks that have some college but no credential back into the workforce. But how do we convince those that are working? Sorry, this is a long question. How do we convince those that are working to take on internships or apprenticeships or get paid or move from, the $23 an hour job at Buc-ee's to working, you're not from the South, you don't know who Buc-ee's is, think 7-Eleven. With full benefits, to an apprenticeship or an internship that is paid, that is actually going to create a true pathway for them going forward. So it's a two-pronged question. What do we do for that population that just graduated, has a computer degree, and can't find a job? They're working at Staples. And what are we going to do about helping to upskill or get those folks that did some college back in and get them into apprenticeships so that they can get the skills they need, both in school and through working? Thank you.
So maybe I'll start. This goes back to the hug with employers. So employers are feeding the information that we are hiring fewer computer science graduates. I believe it's about 13% in the last 2% decline. But it is, how do you diversify computer science? What's the and? And I'll give you an example. My son was studying computer science. I'm like, you got to broaden yourself, diversify. So changed into a program of creative technology and design to leverage computer science, but to look at visual, creative, the physical space. And those computer science graduates are very valuable. We hire many, but they have to diversify their learning. That will make them more valuable. Leading with AI, they become the most expert prompters. So as AI disrupts job, and it's a billion according to the WEF, it's going to change radically. 44% of skills are going to go away in the next 5 years. Employers have to step up and say, these are the skills that are changing. One of the things that we do, and I have my own little skunk works of innovation at our company, it's my innovation hub. The first product we launched is something I'm very passionate about, which is all around reskilling. Because of that, the workforce reskilling, because of the Americans that have some degree credentials have to reskill for jobs. So we use AI in something called Ellucian Journey that in days goes across all of a university, a college specific to them, all the course curriculum. It builds a skills ontology and sort of a honeycomb. It shows an advisor, the student, the president, what are the skills that I'm acquiring as I go through my degree. It brings people back into the workforce. It's going to take those skills and experiences to say, how do we give them credit back in and to complete a certification and a degree on the way out? What does that do? It creates a full life cycle. To not blame academia and professors, and my father was one, that you're not teaching the way you need to, but giving the insights to the entire education system of what is changing in the workforce, because every professor wants their student to be successful. I truly believe that. So this is the opportunity that we have to use the data to build the skills to jobs, to reclaim, help workers to reskill, but also to guide students in this massively disruptive time. How do they pivot? We use our smart plan to navigate that like GPS. We can award saying, hey, there's a credential over here. And then the continuous journey. All of this only works if it is powered by data. If the data is unlocked across an institution, at an individual level, at a system level, and North Carolina, who's #1 to do business, Jeff Cox, the president of North Carolina Community Colleges, knows this with Peter Hans, the university system. To power up the workforce, you have to have access to the data, insights real time and predictive, and that's what we need to do.
So one of the other things I threw out there, Deborah, is within higher education, we need to let go of the idea that we get to stipulate the value proposition. So there's all these short-term credentials that folks are creating, including in AI, that are basically worthless, right? And most of that's something you can quantify when you look into the data. So we have to take more responsibility for the talent problem. And that means working with employers to understand what the skills are so that there's a clear line of sight from those credentials to good jobs or to helping you upskill and reskill in a way that leads to a promotion within your company that the employer is going to value. So I think a key to it is that we've got, it's not that people don't think that more education might be helpful. It's like, can we help them understand that it's worth the risk? For them to invest in these credentials. And it can't just be because we say so. And working on the supply side of it, we've got to understand and take responsibility for working the demand side of it.
Can I add, and I think what I don't want the question to lose sight of is that we must figure out what the lessons are from the computer science phenomena. And There's an idea of where when higher education or education at large loses control of the agenda-setting aspect, you begin to see a proliferation. A lot of this was done in K through 12, with the proliferation of computer science courses into agenda. We're seeing the same thing in states now with AI infusion. And if we lose sight of the ability to advocate, to say, hey, there are lessons to look back on that we could learn on what this could result when there's a misalignment with projections on workforce in the future, it becomes very problematic. And to me, that's the lesson to exit from this. Are we doing the same thing with allied health, right? Are we doing the same thing with nursing? Are there concerns that we should be paying attention to where we create future problems? That happens when we lose control of the agenda in higher education and allow folks to come in there. No blame, because I think a lot of people were trying to tap into the need to really monopolize on developing folks with those skill sets and finding teachers to come into the classrooms to do it, right? So probably benefits came up from it as well, but some lessons that we shouldn't lose sight of that I think that your question also points to.
I'm so sorry to bring this to a close, because I know there's a lot of other great questions out there. Let me just first say quickly on computer science, I'm going to be the contrarian here and say that I think the reality is not going to be quite as dramatic as the current stories. I won't cite all the statistics, but I think what's going to happen is computer science will go from being, roughly the hottest major to only in the top 10. And in terms of both demand and outcomes, time will tell. What a great conversation today. We are seeing so much great work across the country. I just want to highlight a few themes from the panel this morning. Perhaps the strongest one, the power of data to inform action, to help create well-informed choices among learners, institutions, and policymakers. But not just having that data in isolation, but translating that data to action and to helping provide guidance to learners to help sort of chart their journey along the way. We've heard about the importance of affordability as one of the key factors to ensuring a positive ROI. We've heard a lot about the importance of internships and other work-based learning experiences. And finally, this notion of ensuring the availability and awareness of high-wage, high-demand programs. These are the things that are going to help strengthen the connection between education and opportunity in Texas, Indiana, Massachusetts, and states across America. Each of us here today has an important role to play in this future. Higher education leaders, employers, nonprofit executives, business leaders, we have the data. Now it's important for all of us to take constructive action based on that data. If we do, we can ensure that every learner, no matter where they start, can find their path to economic mobility and a choice-filled life. And that's an exciting future indeed. Let's give a round of applause to this great panel this morning. Thank you.